The Incarcerations reveals how the Bhima Koregaon case spells the collapse of democracy in India. The book talks about a coordinated and multi-pronged attack on the key defenders of the various pillars of democracy in our country. Author Alpa Shah is in conversation with our editor Swati Chopra to talk about her book, which should be on the top of your essential reading list.
Hi, everyone. On this World Book Day, we have with us Alpa Shah, who's the author of The Incarcerations. It's a newly released book, and it's about the Bhima Goregaon case. Alpa, welcome. Happy World Book Day. I think for authors and readers alike, this is a wonderful moment to think about all the books that we have read and we are going to read. And of course, for writers, it's a great time to talk about their books. So welcome.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here on this very important day, and also such a pleasure to chat to you, Swati. It's very rarely that one gets the chance to talk to one's editor about books in
True.
in such a circumstance. So thank you for having me.
Yes. Yes, no, thank you for being here with us. And I think our readers would already be quite familiar with the book, but I'll just introduce you also briefly. Alpa is a professor of anthropology at the London School of Economics and is the award-winning writer of Night March and other books, which we will talk about as we go along. So, Alpa, let's begin with The Incarcerations, because that's the book that, apart from the fact that I have worked with you on this book, it's also a very special book because of the time that we have released it in, right before, the general elections that are going to take place in India. But I want to talk a little bit about the process of writing the book. I remember when we first spoke in June 2022, it was a time when you were working on the book, but you were facing a lot of challenges because the subjects of the book were, of course, incarcerated. They were in prison, during in the run up to the trial. And how did you were having difficulty getting interviews and material, and how did you surmount that particular phase, and what made you persist and keep the faith, so to speak?
Thanks, Swati. All books are difficult to write, but maybe some have particular challenges, and this one certainly, it's about an ongoing trial, and it's a very difficult thing to take on. And in fact, as you know, I was I didn't actually choose to write this book. Somebody asked me to write it, your predecessor, and
Okay. Yes.
yes, exactly, the lovely Sidesh, and I felt like, how can you do this to me? I can't possibly say yes to this book, and I can't possibly say no, and but I felt very compelled to write it because of the extraordinary people who are incarcerated in this case, many of whom I, knew before they were incarcerated. If I didn't know them personally, I knew their work, I mean, actually, there's very few I actually knew personally, but I knew their work and I knew how important it was. And yeah, so I think when Stan Swami, the Jesuit priest, died after he'd caught COVID and when he was incarcerated in prison, 83 years old, severe Parkinson's. This was just such a tragedy. And I think in that process, I really committed to, okay, we have to tell this story. And if I've been, I have the privilege and the honor of undertaking this task, I'm going to give it my best possible shot. And when Stan died, I did kind of about more than 40 different interviews on different aspects of his life. I think people were so moved and so outraged by his death that everyone wanted to talk, and I was just flooded with lots of people who wanted to say and who'd give me, who'd tell me about other people to speak to. But it was not always like this, I think that there are real challenges when certain people who I was writing about were under incarceration. There's an ongoing trial, but I realized that there's enough kind of information out there that I could actually, and I had, because I had worked on many of these issues myself prior to the incarcerations, that there was always there were things that really had to be told about their lives and works. And I think so that kind of enabled me to carry on despite the difficulties I faced. And then I think over time, people just kind of, I was really grateful. People trusted in me to tell the stories and to continue and to pursue the project. And I think I think what really gave me an amazing, and what the point of no return after Stan's life works was when I spoke to Sudha Bhardwaj, you know, on we spoke for 2 weeks, like in and out, day in, day out, you know, like literally we were interrupted only by our daughters. And you know, she's just such an amazing person. And we had invited her to the LSE to give our kind of keynote of my last big major projects that we had. And at that time, it was 2017. She was incarcerated in 2018. She couldn't take up that invitation. And I had long wanted to meet her. And I think going over her life story with her was just, you know, extraordinary. And of course, with people like Sudha, who were able to talk to me once they were released from prison, there are certain restrictions that are placed on them. But we never, you know, like, for example, she was not allowed to talk about her case. And so I never even, you know, ventured anywhere near that with Sudha. But that was not the point of speaking to her, you know. For me, I was really very much telling her life story and her life works, and using that to tell the story of Adivasis, or using Anantal Tunde's writings to tell the story of Dalits. So yeah, I think it was a very challenging book to write. But I think when also the evidence started to come out as I was starting to write it, like the cyber forensic evidence, and at that point I thought, wow, you know, actually it's not just about the life stories of these individuals, it's not just about their fight, but there's a whole other story of like the new methods of authoritarian regimes, how democracy is undermined by different kinds of weapons that are being used. And so yeah, I was really lucky with the cyber forensics as well to be able to speak not only to the cyber forensic team that had undertaken the investigations into the implantation of evidence, Arsenal Consulting, but also these other experts in the US who had showed a whole other side of the story, which had not yet been reported on in any form. And yeah, so it just kind of grew and grew, and there were different kinds of challenges along the way. But yeah, I think
That's
certain stories have to be
yes.
told, and you have to persist no matter what. Yes.
So I think one of the interesting aspects of the writing of this book, even as you were speaking, you know, I mean, you're a trained anthropologist, you're an academic, but when you talk about the writing of the incarcerations, it almost seems like an investigative journalist, you know, who is delving deeper and deeper into the layers of a story, and you know, is following leads and doing interviews, and of course that's part of your anthropological work as well. But it's so there. And you did mention that writing your previous book, Night March, sort of made you relearn or learn writing for a wider readership, almost as in terms of a journalistic writing even. So would you like to say a little bit about how the process of your writing has changed over these two books?
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, I think firstly, I write very much as a scholar, both of these books. And yes, there are points at which, especially in the incarcerations, I turn into a journalist and I'm doing this investigation,
Yes.
and I want my readers to come with me, you know, and want to know what's going to happen next. And so that's definitely, those kinds of boundaries are blurred, but it would have been impossible to write both of these books had it not been for the years of scholarly work I had done on both Adivasis and then also on Dalits and on India more generally. So you know, I think there is a difference. We can go into that more if you want to later, but for me, with both of these books, I think what I wanted to do was to reach audiences which were beyond my own echo chamber, beyond the academic circles, because I felt that there were, in both of these books, you know, uh, stories that really needed to be heard by a much wider audience, an Indian audience, but also a global audience. I wanted the new generations to care about the people that I had met and that I was writing about, I wanted them to be inspired. In the incarceration, certainly I wanted them to be inspired by their lives, especially the youth, of the future. And I think there were also facts that had to be told, lies that had to be exposed, in both of these books actually. And so you're right, as academics, we are trained to write for other academics. We often use like 50 sentences to say what could be said in one sentence. Many academics, actually are concerned about making up concepts and words that, no one else can understand. And I think, so it just made me, both of these books made me question, what am I doing as an academic? Yes, there is an importance for scholarly work and scholarly publications. And I'm not getting rid of that at all. But I think it's also important to make our work accessible to wider audiences. And so I had to really relearn, actually, because you, as academics, you get trained into writing in a particular fashion, and you have to retrain yourself. How do you make characters compelling so that they can tell the, reading those characters going to show you the points you want to make, rather than like hammer it down in like kind of, in very academic text. And so I think one of my inspirations like really was like George Orwell, and where he basically says that you know it that one of his inspirations was very much telling the world what that there was this injustice going on, and at the same time making that into an aesthetic experience. So it's writing is a form of art, and trying to think about writing in that way, and to think about the reader as well, right? So there's the reader that you're always thinking about. I remember Sartre has this wonderful piece on reading, and how what you want to do is try to engage the reader into your imaginary world that you want to incite through your work, and make them care so much that they want to take action into those insights that you're sharing with them. So it's both thinking about why you are writing, what you're trying to do, and then also thinking about the audience and what you're trying to make the reader feel and see, and so to really think about those things in a concerted way, in ways that we just don't do normally as academics. I think those were really important things driving my writing in both books.
Absolutely. I think I was privileged enough to be one of the first readers of the manuscript, your initial draft. And one of the things that really caught my attention, and that really moved me, was the fact that you took us not just through the case and what happened and, the bare bones of that, but you took us into the life work of all the incarcerated, the people who were being called anti-national and were being and so on, and you showed them through their life work as being the best and brightest defenders of democracy, so to speak. So this show rather than tell approach, which works so well, and as you said, it makes us care enough to try and do something. So what made you adopt this particular approach?
Yeah, it's exactly, I think, the things like we've talked about really, that so the incarcerations moves between two different forms of writing, actually. So there's the bits which are like me being an investigative journalist, which are, let's go into the heart of the riots in Bhima Koregaon. Let's be Anita Savale. What is she facing? This is the Dalit woman who was caught in the middle of the riots and who gave me an amazing interview. And, she files the first information report against the Hindutva instigators of the riots. And so, we're in the middle of that, we're uncovering what happens, and then we're in the cyber forensics. So there's that aspect of the writing, but there's also these deeply moving, accounts of, some of them are more in depth than others. And that's not, this is moving accounts of the BK16. And so what I was trying to do here is, firstly, I wanted to give readers, I wanted them to know about all of the BK16. So I wanted to humanize all of them against this idea of them being terrorists and anti-nationals and, what they were being cast as. And the second thing was, I think what drove how I wrote those sections was that actually they weren't just life histories. They were actually stories about the wider issues they worked on and why the way they worked on those issues is so important for the world. So I focus on some of the characters, some of the BK16 more than others, not because they're more important, but because they enable me to tell you the story of, firstly, Adivasis, which you get through the work of Stan Swami and Sudha Bhardwaj. And then the second is Dalits, the whole Dalit story, which you get through the life works of Anantal Jumde. And the third is Muslims, and really thinking that through the prism of Kashmir, which is the story of Gautam Navlakha and his life works. And of course, so that's what I was trying to do in these through these characters that are, big sections of the incarcerations. And they are very compelling, compelling characters. And I wanted you to feel them, to feel the difficulties they had in their lives, the struggles that they had faced when Sudha Bhardwaj decides, for example, to turn from being a trade unionist to becoming a lawyer at the age of 40 with a young child, how and why she does that. I wanted you to understand, the pressures on her, the kinds of challenges she faced, and through those personal stories, to care about the issues that she was fighting for on the ground, so yeah, so that was I think that was what I was trying to achieve, and hopefully, yeah, some of that comes across in the reading of the book.
Absolutely, it does. I mean, I think that's it's the way the book is written is, I think, part of the reason why it's so effective and successful as a work of nonfiction. So when we talk of writing, Alpa, we usually talk about the process of writing, which we have been about for the last few minutes. But a book's reception is also, I feel, is a very important part. It's integral to the writing of it. So it's still early days for the Incarcerations, but what about you? What about its reception by people moves you the most? And what, basically what catches your attention in terms of the way people are responding to this book?
I think if you just, in a quick sentence, it's just like the love it's getting. It's just phenomenal. I never expected to be able to do this, to make people I mean, it's not my book anymore. It never was my book. I'm just a medium for you to hear these stories and to learn about what's happening in the country at large and what democracy ought to mean for the world, which I think the BK16 and this case really shows us. And I think I always saw myself as a medium. And what I see now is that the book is really, it's not my book. It is everyone's book, and it's being loved and taken care of, and people are doing things with it that I never imagined. Like, for example, when, a friend in Ranchi in Jharkhand sent me a message back in London saying, "Oh, Ravish Kumar is talking about your book," and I was like, "Oh, really? And where? And what is it?" So I didn't know what was going on, and then a few hours later, I saw that, yes, Ravish Kumar had devoted a whole program, to this book and this case. And of course, Ravish Kumar had been dealing with this case from the moment, way before I even got interested in it, but this book became a medium for him to talk about much wider issues in this case. And, it became his book. And then the book of 200 million people who viewed that program in, 2 million people who viewed that program in 24 hours. So I think it's that. And then these messages I'm getting from people who are just like blown away, talking about, yeah, how the book is both making them terribly sad and drawing tears, but also how it's also giving them hope. And I think that, like, that hope as well, it's just, I also really wanted to create that sense of hope in readers, because the stories are so inspiring. There is so much possibility still, to fight on and to create spaces for what matters the most. So yeah, I think, I don't know if I'm going on for too long, but yes, it's the love that it's getting from places I never even imagined, readers I never imagined I would ever connect to. Yeah, that's really very, very moving.
Yes, and this is just the beginning, as I said, and there's we hope that a lot more readers are going to read this in English and other languages, hopefully
Mm.
soon. But in terms of what you said, that I think that for me, a book like The Incarcerations is nonfiction writing at its best, because it gives us the facts, it creates an engaging narrative, it tells us the story, but it also has a lot of heart. So it touches one, it informs and moves. It engages the reader at multiple levels. So I just wanted to ask you, Alpa, what are the kinds of books that you have read that have touched you in a similar way or engaged you in a similar way?
Oh yeah, I mean, so many books. Where do I draw my inspiration from? So we talked about Orwell to start with, and I wanted to, bring us back to him maybe. So two books of his that really moved me was The Road to Wigan Pier, and also Homage to Catalonia, when he's like, stuck in this kind of fight against the Franco regime. And I think for me that this is like kind of political writing at its best, that really, moves you to, you're in those situations, but then you're getting a wider insight into the world that make you see the world in completely different ways. Or John Berger's way of seeing, for example, is very similar. You will never look at an oil painting in the same way again once you've read him. But yeah, there's also amazing like Indian writers that I'm completely, drawn to, and that have done this kind of work for me. Rohinton Mishra's works, for example, or more contemporary writers like Sonia Valero's Good Girls, or My Beautiful, The Beautiful Thing that she wrote. There are so many incredible writers, and I'm always drawing, hope and inspiration from lots of different kinds of writing. Much of it is, to do with these kinds of issues that you're tackling issues of injustice, but also writings that's leaving you with hope, hope that you can like change things, even though it's so desperate, the situation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what books do, right? I mean, that's what art and literature and books are meant to do, is to give us hope and show us, the kernel of something that is eternal in every moment. So I think that is what the best kind of art points us to. But we have a few more minutes. So do you want to talk a little bit about your writing rituals? I think I always enjoy hearing all kinds of writers talk about, how they get into their writing mode. So do you have anything special?
Oh my gosh. Well, if you asked me this question like when I was writing Night March, and you ask it of me now with the Incarcerations, are completely different answers, and I
Okay.
think this is very much to do with life cycle moments and being a mother.
Hmm.
So, we have I love it when these writers like, Dalrymple say, oh, I like, yeah, just these kind of rituals that people have, that they sit at their beautiful desk in their garden shed and or and have these kind of timed rituals. I mean, when you're a mother of a 2-year-old, and we're trying to write under circumstances of COVID and lockdown, and
And
when you basically grab any single minute that you get And it's you write in any circumstance. I think with this book, I had to write it, and we had decided that we were going to bring it out before the Indian election, so somehow I had to get it done. And I thought it's going to be a small book initially. We thought it's going to be a 60,000 word book, maybe at the most 100,000, but it grew into this huge project which is 160,000 words. And I just remember, all I remember is these nights when I was writing, and it's like 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, I'm so tired. And but I know I have to write for another hour because there's this bit that I have to finish. And tomorrow morning I'll be up at 6 o'clock because little one is gonna be kicking me in the bed or something. And so it's literally like there are no rituals in this in the Incarcerations. It's completely ritual free. Well, one of the things that used to help me a lot, and that still helps me a lot, is I'm a swimmer. So like any opportunity I get to swim, I'll swim, and then I work out like problems in my head, and try to, it gives me a space away from the writing to figure out how to move on when I'm in a difficult space. But that's I think walking or listening to something completely different does that for many people. But yes, I have to say, I think it's really important, this whole ritual thing, I think, to realize different people's, like especially mothers, hardly ever talk about the fact that that's what the situation we're in most of the time, is just write in any space you possibly can, get it out any which way at any time of the night.
I
Yeah.
hear you. No, but thank you so much, Alpa, for sharing, on this World Book Day, on this very special occasion. Thank you for sparing the time to talk to us about the incarcerations and much more. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Swati. It was a pleasure to be here with you.
Likewise.